Alright, what's going on everyone? In this video, I'm going to show you how to upgrade the Armed and Dangerous Magic Arena starter deck. We'll be upgrading the deck in 2 stages. First, I'll show you how to upgrade the deck with only commons and uncommons, so you can build this on a budget, and then I'll show you some of the rares and mythics you can use if you have a few extra wild cards, though I do caution you to spend those wisely as they are difficult to obtain. So the Armed and Dangerous deck has 2 major themes. The first is equipment. Not only does the deck contain a lot of powerful equipment like Scavenged Blade, Maul of the Skyclaves, Sword of the Realms, but it also has payoffs to make these equipment even more powerful, like Fireblade Charger, Bruenor Battle Hammer, and Core Blade Master. All of these can be pretty explosive with a few pieces of equipment on the battlefield. And this leads us to our second theme, because all of these creatures have a creature type in common, and that's warriors. So we get Kargan War Leader to bring this all together for more power. This is a tribal warriors deck and an equipment deck. So the problem is it has a few underpowered pieces of equipment like Dwarven Hammer and Rune of Haste, which isn't even an equipment, as well as some creatures that don't synergize with the rest of the deck, like Kitesail Cleric for example. So we can shore this up and make this deck a little bit more consistent just by replacing these cards with things that are a little bit more on theme or a little bit more powerful. So first off, for our budget build, we're going to take out 2 Shepherd of the Cosmos for 2 more Kargan War Leaders. I actually think the Shepherd can be pretty good in the late game, but I do find that it's a little clunky, and the Lord is going to make our deck much more capable of running opponents down in the early to mid game. You fill the deck with warriors, naturally we want a Lord. Next we'll take out 1 Kitesail Cleric for a 4th Fireblade Charger. The Cleric doesn't do much in this deck, and the Charger is fantastic because it can get haste when equipped. A lot of people actually forget about that, and if it has a bunch of power, it can blow up a creature when it dies, or maybe even just blow the opponent up, and that's very relevant. I mean, if you can get this to like a 4/4 with equipment, not only are you beating with a 4/4, but if it dies, it's dealing 4 damage or something. It's pretty good. We'll take out the other Kitesail Cleric for a cool the Forge Master, so we don't have a lot of ways to make tokens. That's not why we're playing this. The important part is if a creature that's equipped dies, it gets returned to our hand. This is great because the deck can fall apart against removal. We have a very delicate balance between equipment and creatures, and if our creatures get killed, we can be left with a pile of equipment and nothing to equip them to. So cool, being able to constantly recycle creatures is great, and it's even better if it's the Fireblade Charger because it constantly blows stuff up when it dies, and then you can just replay it, re-equip it, and it even has haste when you do that, so not bad. And speaking of having a pile of equipment on the battlefield, one problem this deck can have is re-equipping all of your equipment once a creature dies. The equip cost can really add up, and sometimes we have to spend multiple turns just re-equipping all of our stuff onto a creature, and that can sometimes just make us fall behind. So we need to fix that, and we have a great way of doing it because we can replace Rune of Speed with Plate Armor. This equipment solves this problem. It gives a creature +3/+3, which is actually pretty strong, but most importantly, its equip cost is reduced by the number of other equipment we have. Meaning, if we have a pile of equipment, especially if we have a pile of plate armors, they could potentially cost 0 to equip. And this is great in the late game. If we have a creature that has a pile of plate armors on it or whatever, and that creature dies, it's very cheap and potentially free to just move everything on to the next creature. That's pretty powerful in this deck. So powerful in fact that we're also going to replace the 3 Dwarven Hammers for 3 more plate armors. The Dwarven Hammers are not bad. I don't hate the hammers, they're just clunky. I find that if I have the full 5 mana to get the token, then chances are I have 5 mana to play and equip the plate armor with another equipment in play, so it only costs 2 to equip. And at that point, the 2/1 token doesn't really matter. And then in the late game, again, once we have a creature die with a pile of equipment, it's so much easier to move that plate armor around. I mean, this deck's biggest weakness, I think, is having a creature with a bunch of equipment on it get killed with a removal spell. And the plate armor it really just solves that problem for this deck. And I didn't even mention, it gives wards, so not only does it solve that problem by making the equipment cheap to re-equip, it also just makes the creature hard to target in the first place. So I like this a lot. Next, we're going to take out the Pigment Storm for another Brunor. Pigment Storm is just a really expensive removal spell. Too expensive for what it does. I mean, sure, killing something and also getting some extra damage to the opponent is nice, but I don't really like it that much, especially since we're in white, so we have better removal options if we really want removal. But I personally want to increase the warrior count in this deck. For a tribal warrior deck, I don't think we have enough, so Brunor is a perfect replacement. It's, a similar mana cost, technically cheaper. It's also very powerful. It's a great top-end threat. It's a warrior, so it's going to get pumped up by our lord, and it can just lead to these massive blowouts where, we already have a pile of equipment, and then we play Brunor and it gets like 1,000,000 power. So it's pretty good. I definitely like it a lot more than Pigment Storm. And then finally, for the budget deck, I want to take out Resolute Strike for another Core Blade Master. Basically for the same reasons. A Resolute Strike is a solid combat trick, but like I mentioned, I think we need more creatures in the deck, and Core Blade Master is one of our most powerful early game threats. It has double strike, gives everything else double strike. It can lead to these like massive attacks early, can end the game really quick sometimes. Obviously it's not guaranteed, but it's just really powerful, and more importantly, it just gives us more creatures and more warriors in the deck, which I think is kind of necessary. And that's it for the budget deck. We're actually able to squeeze quite a bit of power into this thing without using rares or mythics. And you could probably continue to add like extra Brunors and extra Core Blade Masters for the budget deck if you wanted, but for not using a single rare or mythic, I think we actually really powered this up. But there are still some really good rares and mythics we can use. So first off, we can take out Arnie Broken Brow for Akiri Fearless Voyager. Arnie is an awesome card. I actually really like this, and it does kind of synergize because his boast ability works with the equipment kind of, but he's not a warrior, and that's relevant. And also, Akiri makes so much more sense in an equipment deck just because she enables us to draw extra cards. Drawing cards is great, especially with how our deck plays, because this deck, you can sometimes draw too much equipment and not enough creatures. You can sometimes draw too many creatures and not enough equipment. So card draw is very relevant. And the fact that we get decent card draw and Boros also pretty good. So we just need something like this. I think it's important. And she also protects creatures. She can pay 1, unequip to give something indestructible. And with plate armors, sometimes that costs 0, right? Like you unequip a plate armor, give something indestructible, and then just pay 0 to re-equip it. So that's relevant. And for the same reason, we're going to take out Lorehold Command for another Akiri. So much like Arnie, Lorehold Command is actually like a pretty fantastic card. I think this card's underrated. It's not really played that much, but I really like it. But this continues to increase our creature count. Technically, you can put a token into play with the command, but it's not a warrior. And while the command can help us draw as well, Akiri does it. She's a warrior, she synergizes with equipment. Akiri just makes more sense here. So I like the Lorehold Command a lot, but in this deck I think Akiri is more relevant. And then next I want to take out the last Resolute Strike and the Rune of Sustenance for 2 Maul of the Skyclaves. So neither of these cards are particularly powerful. I mean, the Rune of Sustenance it's pretty good sometimes because the lifelink can definitely be relevant, especially on a big creature with like double strike. So the Rune of Sustenance isn't bad. You could probably keep it if you really, really like it, but the Maul is one of the most powerful pieces of equipment in Standard. If you play on Arena or play Standard at all, chances are you've been killed a few times by a creature equipped with the Maul, so it's totally worth it in my opinion. Great piece of equipment. We could also take out the Showdown of the Skalds for Nahiri. So the Showdown is actually pretty great. I've played it in other decks, but Nahiri just has way more synergy with our deck. She pumps out tokens, and not just any tokens, but warrior tokens, so it works with our warrior tribal theme, and she can also dig for equipment and more warriors, and her final ability will also let you blow stuff up based on the number of equipment you have. But it's sort of similar to Showdown, right? Showdown, the purpose of Showdown is it gives us some extra cards, and then we get counters. In the case of Nahiri, we get extra cards in the form of digging for equipment and warriors. And also, while we don't get counters, we get tokens, and those tokens are warriors. And it's a good card. Very similar, same mana cost, similar in their card advantage. It's just more synergistic with our deck. And I also think we can take out one of the Akum warriors for an extra Nahiri. I think this deck has enough lands, potentially too many lands. So Nahiri, also really good here, a little bit better than the Akum warrior. You could also potentially just take out a basic land and keep the warriors in play, though that does increase the number of tap lands. You have a higher percentage of tap lands by doing that, so it's up to you, but either way, an extra Nahiri, pretty good. And as always, you can improve the mana base by replacing the snow lands with snarls. Even though the snarls enter the battlefield tapped sometimes, the snow lands enter the battlefield tapped every time, so the snarls are a little bit better. They could also be the Strixhaven campus that scries. That's also a perfectly reasonable replacement. You can also take out a few basics for 3 more pathways, because why have a plains or a mountain when you can have either or, depending on which one you need, with the pathway. And that's it. There are maybe a few more things we could do, like maybe it's worth taking out the Baskier Shield Mates for like an extra core Blade Master or a cool, right? Like you could take out 2 of those, add 1 of each, something like that. Maybe instead of having 4 plate armors and 3 mauls, we should have 4 mauls and 3 armors. Maybe that's something we should do. I do question if we still have too many lands. Maybe we can replace 1 with like a 3rd Akiri, or an extra cool or something, I don't know. It might be worth taking out a mountain or 2 for Shatter Skull smashing. That's also probably relevant, probably worth it, maybe. And there are some other warriors I wanted to try in this deck, Legion Angel in particular. You just put 1 in the main deck and 3 in the sideboard, and it's pretty great value. It's a warrior that has flying too, which is very relevant. So there's a lot of stuff I wanted to do. There was not enough room to add all these cards. But overall, the deck we have now is way more powerful and way more consistent than what we started with. You should definitely find yourself winning more games with this version of the deck. You're still going to run into problems sometimes where you draw too many creatures, or you draw too many equipment, but it should smooth out those problems. And yeah, that's it guys. That's the video. I hope it was helpful. Consider leaving a like if it was. Consider subscribing for more, as I will be upgrading all 10 starter decks over the course of the next few weeks, I don't know. But in the meantime, thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.